In this section, we're going to do division with decimal numbers, and it looks very similar to long division with whole numbers. There's a couple of differences, though, and we'll talk about them as we go. First of all, I want to divide 25 into 276, and what I want to do, let's carry this out to, say, the nearest hundredth and see what happens. So 25 into 276, I'm first going to make an estimate of the answer, just so I can see where I am about. 25 times 10 is going to be 250, so I'm going to say the answer to this is about 10. There's my estimate. Now let's do our regular division, 25 into 27. That will go once. I multiply 1 times 25 and get 25. Subtract 5 from 7 is 2. Bring down the next term, 6. Now 25 divides into 26 one time. 1 times 25 is 25. And I subtract and get 1. Now normally at this point I would stop and that would be my remainder of 1. But in this case what I want to do is keep going by putting a decimal point here and then adding as many zeros as I want. Let's just go to the nearest hundredth though. So I'm going to put a decimal point here and then 2 zeros so I can continue this division. So I'll bring down this 0 and say 25 goes into 10 0 times. Now that decimal point in the answer is going to go directly above the decimal point in the problem. Bring down the next 0. 25 divides into 100 4 times. I multiply 4 times 25. I get 100. Subtract and get 0. So before we would have stopped at this point right here and just had a remainder of 1. Now we can keep going with decimal and putting as many zeros to the right of the decimal point as we want. And in this case, we got to this point and the problem came out even. So 25 divides into 276 exactly 11.04 times. And you can see my original estimate was 10, and so my actual answer, 11.04, is close enough to that so that we know we're right in the ballpark as far as the answer goes. Now, if I want to, I can check this answer by multiplying 25 by 11.04, and I want to do that. 25 times 11.04. Let's just see if we can do this real quick. I'll multiply. 5 times 4 is 20. Carried the 2, but I had a 0. 5 times 1 is 5. 5 times 1 is 5. Put that 0 for the placeholder. 2 times 4 is 8. 2 times 0 is 0. 2 times 1 is 2. And 2. Now we'll add in columns 0, 0, carry the 1, 6, 7, 2. 2 places to the right of the decimal point here, so I'll put 2 places to the right here. And you can see there's my 276. So 25 divides into 276 exactly 11 and 4/100ths times. And I checked that by doing the multiplication over here. So you can see that it works. With division, the decimal point in the answer goes directly above the decimal point in the thing we're dividing into, the dividend. We can only divide by whole numbers. We can't divide by decimals. Let's look at our next example. 4.5 into 29.25. Like I said before, we can't divide by a decimal, so I want to rewrite this as just 45. So I'm going to multiply this number by 10. That will move the decimal point that many places to the right, and I'll just have 45. I do the same thing to this number, and that moves the decimal point here. The decimal point in the answer then will go directly above that. So what I've actually done is this. I have 4.5 divided by, what I have is 29.25 divided by 4.5. Now I can multiply the numerator and denominator of any fraction by any number I want, and I know it won't change the value of it. So if I multiply this by 10 and this by 10, I know I'll have a fractional equivalent to what I started with. 10 times this is 292.5, and 10 times this is 45. So you see, my moving this decimal point over one place to make this divisor a whole number and then doing the same thing over here really coincides with this property I have for fractions, where I can multiply the numerator and denominator by any number I want, and I know it won't change the value of that fraction. Now we're ready to do our division. So I'm going to divide. I'm going to say 45 divides into 29. It won't go. So 45 into 292, that's going to be, let's try 6. 6 times 5 is 30. 6 times 4 is 24, and 3 is 27. Now I'll subtract. 2 subtract 0 is 2. 9 subtract 7 is 2. Bring down that 5, and let's see. 45 goes into 225. Let's try 5. 5 times 5 is 25. Carry the 2. 5 times 4 is 20, plus 2 is 22, and sure enough, this divides in evenly. So 4.5 divides into 29.25 exactly 6.5 times. The only thing that you have to remember is that you can only divide by whole numbers. So if your divisor right here is a decimal, we've got to multiply to get that decimal point over to the right enough so that this becomes a whole number. Let's look at another one of these problems. Let's divide 0.012 into 1.068. So here I know I can't divide by this decimal. I have to change this into a whole number. So I need to multiply by 10, 100, 1,000. So if I multiply this number right here by 1,000, I'll have just 12 for the divisor. If I do that to the divisor, I have to do it to the dividend also. So I multiply by 10, 100, 1,000. That puts my decimal point right there. So this problem then changes to the division problem, just simply 12 into 1068 decimal point if I need it. The decimal point in the answer will go directly above the decimal point in the problem. Let's see if we actually need it. 12 into 10, that won't work. 12 into 106, let's try 8. 8 times 2 is 16, carry the 1. 8 times 1 is 8, and 1 is 9. Now subtract. 6 from 6 is 0. 9 from 10 is 1. Let's bring down that 8. And let's see, 12 into 108, that should be 9. 9 times 2 is 18, carry the 1. 9 times 1 is 9, and 1 is 10. Now I subtract and get 0, so I see that this divides evenly. 12 into 1068 divides evenly, and I get 89. That's the same as the answer to this problem right here. 1.068 divided by 0.0012 is exactly the same as 1068 divided by 12. If I multiply this number and this number by 1,000, I get this number and this number. So as far as long division goes with decimal numbers, we follow the same exact procedures that we did when we did long division with whole numbers. We have to remember that we can't divide by a decimal, so we have to change that divisor into a whole number. Whatever number of places we move that decimal point to do that, we need to do the same thing to the dividend. Then we can start our division process.